Is barring two nuclear inspectors from entering the Islamic Republic, a move that's sure to raise tensions between the rogue state and the West over its nuclear ambitions and its nuclear program. And this comes a day after the Defense Secretary Robert Gates says that the Obama administration is not prepared to even talk about containing a nuclear Iran. Here's the Secretary on Fox News Sunday.
Our view still is we do not accept the idea of Iran having nuclear weapons, and our policies and our efforts are all aimed at preventing that from happening.
Let's bring in international security and Iran expert Jim Walsh of MIT's Security Studies program. Always good to talk to you, Jim. And, pretty frank comments from the Pentagon chief. It seems to me that being able to talk about Iran having a nuclear program is the very least that we should be prepared to be doing.
Yeah, I think Gates suffers from a misunderstanding here, not him, but his comments. When you talk about containment, that's really a technical term, a narrow term used in nuclear policy, and it's really focused on countries that have already crossed that threshold, that have become nuclear weapon states. And up until that point, what you're trying to do is prevent them from becoming nuclear weapon states. Once they cross that line, that's when you go to containment. But in all honesty, we're already trying to contain Iran politically, diplomatically, and we're selling arms to our Arab allies in the region, in part to contain Iran. But as a matter of nuclear policy, you work on prevention, and if that fails, then you go to containment.
Well, we'll talk about the sanctions in a couple of minutes. But, first, the Secretary says, and he told Chris Wallace yesterday, all options are on the table. But yesterday here on Fox, I had a chance to talk with the former U.S. ambassador to the UN, John Bolton, and I asked Ambassador Bolton if he thought all options were on the table. Take a listen to what he said.
Let's be clear. The Obama administration has zero intention to use force. They can use the phrase, all options are on the table. Nobody believes them. Nobody believes them, especially in Tehran.
Jim, what do you think about that?
I think if you're talking about the near term, that's probably right, but not in the long term. Why do I say that? The chief group that opposes the use of military force in Iran right now are our own uniformed military. They've given that message to the public, to the Israelis, to others. Why? We have 90,000 young men and women in Iraq. That borders Iran. We have another 40,000 in Afghanistan. That borders Iran. And they don't want to start a shooting war and put those young men and women at risk. But as you know, Rick, we are reducing our troop commitments in Iraq. And it may well be, there may come a time, a year, 2 years, 3 years down the road, where the U.S. military will not object to that, and then it becomes a live option.
So the sanctions were passed earlier in the month. The European Union seems to be on board as well. There is a sort of a coming together, I guess, about trying to punish and hit Iran where it hurts. But once again, Iran digging in its heels. It sort of seems like this is a broken record. Is it time for a new strategy, do you think?
Well, if there are new ideas out there, I think anyone is willing to listen to them. The sanctions will have some effect, but at the end of the day, this sort of behavior is expected. When you sanction a country, they almost always react, at least in the short term, by pushing back and stomping their feet and being upset. Now, the question is, after that phase, after a couple of months, and if these sanctions have a bite, does that begin to change their mind? Iran is a country with a very young population, a very high percentage under the age of 35. And when I was in Iran, Iranian officials are aware of that. They cannot have an economy in which there are going to be lots and lots of unemployed young men and expect to survive in the long run. So, I've never been a big fan of sanctions. I think in some ways we overemphasize them. They're a tool, but only a tool. But until Iran comes back to the negotiating table, it's going to be tough to make progress here.
Real quickly, I've got only a couple of seconds, Jim. If the overall goal is regime change and getting a new government in place, the best way to do that is?
It's probably sanctions. But, Rick, in 30 seconds, even if we have a regime change, that may not lead to a change in nuclear policy. Even if reformers want to have enrichment, we really have to get at the nuclear problem separate from these other issues.
Jim Walsh of MIT, thanks very much for coming in, Jim. Good to see you.